Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming video. We're going to be discussing Far Cry 4 on the Xbox One versus the PlayStation 4. This is also an article. Yes, it is up, and you can check that out, of course, in the video's description if you need more information than what I can possibly go through in this article. So, of course, just yesterday we did pop up our initial impressions regarding the Xbox One versus the PS4 versions of the game, and now we've had some more time, 24 hours basically, to really count them pixels, and we can say that both versions do stack up fairly well against one another. For the most part, it would appear that the Xbox One's difference to the PS4 is primarily down to the internal rendered resolution. Now, as I mentioned on the internet, originating from Beyond3d, there were some rumours that the Xbox One's version is indeed 1400 or 1440 by 1080. At that point, I hadn't actually been completely and utterly starting my analysis, I was more getting raw footage, but since then I have actually done some pixel counting, I would pretty much agree with those statements. You can definitely tell that the resolution isn't quite up to where the PS4 is, particularly when you're dealing with basically angled lines. You can see that there is some stepping there. It does help to make a more aliased image, but it's not too bad. It's still a higher pixel count than 900p, even though, once again, of course, 1440 by, say, 1080 is more of a PR number to say 1080p. But I can live with it simply because it does look better. Now, I'm going to speak about the performance, even though we've not finished our frame rate analysis yet. I do want to touch on that. Both platforms perform really well. In fact, I've only actually found one or two very minute dips on both versions at the moment, and that's going through multiple hours of footage. I've literally found very little frame rate dip. Explosions, forest fires, pretty much nothing really seems to tank the frame rate in either version. I would say, and this is once again me not finished yet, so pretty early stuff, I would say the PS4 version is ever so slightly more stable, but that could just be pure luck. So don't take that as a final finding. That is me just saying what I found currently, because obviously the frame rate process is very different to the graphics analysis process. In regards to shadows, lighting and so forth, I have to say that the shadows, the lighting on this game are pretty damn phenomenal, and they're a marked improvement from previous Far Cry 3 on the previous generation consoles. Now, overall, the shadow quality is pretty damn impressive. The edges are softer, they accurately reflect the direction of, say, the sunlight or whatever light source happens to be, and they do, for the most part, realistically react to what you would expect in a game world. They can get a bit hinky when dealing with lots of foliage and so forth, but mostly they work extremely well, and you will see, for example, campfires accurately reflecting what you would expect in real life. Now, I do want to discuss a few small minor details actually when it comes to the game world. Now, textures are definitely a huge improvement from Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3, simply because of the limited amount of RAM, yeah, the textures were kind of murky at points. Far Cry on the PS4, Xbox One, and of course PC aren't like that. There are the occasional textures on areas that you might not really think to visit that can look a little bit ropey, but they're very few and far in between, and for the most part you're not going to notice that. It all looks really lush, whether it's a wood texture, whether it's the ground, whether it's your gun. They look really impressive, and I don't really think there's a difference between the versions. Looking at, say, model characters, it looks like they're pretty much the same assets, at least to my eyes. Furthermore, in regarding, I do want to discuss distances just a little bit, level of detail. Now, on previous Far Cry console versions, as I mentioned, just didn't have the GPU processing power nor the memory bandwidth to really be able to push those frames. Now that's not the situation. Now we have the performance where pop-in isn't so much of a big deal. This is particularly noticeable if you're, say, hand gliding on a helicopter, and dare I say it, of course, on a zip line. You're going to see that it does look a hell of a lot nicer. I have noticed a very slight difference in the Xbox One's pop-up. It does seem to be slightly more frequent than the PS4's. It's not anything to write home about. It is not frequent on the Xbox One. I want to make that clear, but it does seem ever so slightly more on the Xbox One. But overall, to be totally honest, the biggest issue that I've found at the moment is the resolution. Now, in regards to the anti-aliasing, Ubisoft are indeed using a different anti-aliasing technique. This was linked, it's SIGGRAPH 2014. The anti-aliasing technique in question is actually known as, let me just double check, that's it, hybrid reconstruction anti-aliasing. And it's pretty much a very nice form of anti-aliasing. It's extremely cheap. It's, according to Ubisoft, requiring only 1 ms of GPU rendering time at 1080p, which is really impressive when you consider. And to be totally honest, it looks rather nice, even static images, but even in motion it looks pretty impressive as well. I will point out one slight weakness of the game, and that is to do with fur quality. There are some fur issues on the animals. You're going to notice a little bit, it looks a little bit hinky, particularly on the edges of the animals in regards to the contrast of, say, stones. I've put that in the article if you need more information in comparison to the PS4 and X1. Now, we're heading to the point where you're not going to be seeing a comparison anymore, and you're just going to be seeing like full screen images on the screen. And the reason that I've done that is because I want to really show you the game world and how things actually interact. Now, these are actually taken from the PS4 version, not that it really matters, because for the most part everything's pretty identical anyway. Now, the main purpose of those is to really show you what the water looks like, how the water affects a cascade, fire effects, explosions, and so on, just so you can get an idea of how light, fire, and so forth interact with the environment. One primary weakness I have with this game, other than the physics, which can definitely be a little bit off, you get the familiar animals tumbling down cliffs, which just looks really, really bizarre. But one primary issue I have is that, yes, buildings can catch a light and they can become a bit damaged, and you can get fire which can slightly ravage the environment, but it doesn't feel like the environment can be damaged enough. In comparison to, say, Crysis, it would just be nice to be able to do that a little bit more damage to things. So, for example, if I throw a grenade, I would expect, say, a crater. If I shoot trees, I would expect them to eventually start crumbling, a la the original Crysis. Once again, this is just being rather pernickety, but it just gives you an idea of kind of what I would expect on the next generation title, ideally. Overall, I'm extremely impressed with my time so far on both versions of Far Cry 4. I will be finishing up any final conclusions I have in the frame rate analysis, but I think it's fair to say that if you're a fan of Far Cry 3 or an open world type of pew 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 game, you're definitely going to be having a great time in this game. Finally, which version should you buy? Really, most likely doesn't come down to a few pixels in this particular case. This is not a situation of Assassin's Creed Unity where the Xbox One version had a clear frame rate advantage. No, 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 no. This is a situation where, yes, the Xbox One version does have a slightly lower resolution, but it's really down to you, like who online are you going to play with, which controls do you prefer, and so forth. Oh, and I will mention as well, the controls themselves feel extremely responsive for this game because the frame rate is that much more stable. It's a far smoother experience to control than, once again, picking on it just for a moment, Assassin's Creed Unity. So I would personally recommend just buying it on what your preferred platform is. PS4 version does get a very slight nod, but this is not, once again, to reiterate, a situation of Assassin's Creed Unity or even Call of Duty, which once again had a slight frame rate advantage on a single player on the Xbox One, but multiplayer slight performance advantage on the PS4. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. We will be finishing off this with some other bits and pieces over the next few days. Obviously we've got Dragon Age to cover, we have frame rate analysis on this, we're finishing Grand Theft Auto, and a lot of other stuff. In fact, if you can hear some light clinking, it's because I have Amata helping me in the studio actually recording Grand Theft Auto. She's very painstakingly right now looking at textures and looking into water butts. I kid you not. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.